Hello, everyone. Imagine a prophecy so terrifying, so absolute, that even the Allfather, Odin himself, the wisest and most powerful of all gods, could not escape its clutches. We often hear tales of monstrous villains, creatures of pure evil, driven by an innate malice to sow destruction. But what if the greatest monster of Norse mythology, the mighty wolf Fenrir, was not born evil, but was in fact forged into a bringer of doom by the very gods who feared him? What if his terrifying destiny to swallow Odin, the sovereign of Asgard, was not an act of unbridled hatred, but an inescapable consequence, a self-fulfilling prophecy woven by the chilling threads of fear, suspicion? This isn't merely a story of a colossal wolf and a divine king. No, this is a chilling, high-stakes exploration of fate versus free will, of the desperate measures that power will take to preserve itself, and of how the very dread of what might be can inadvertently, tragically, birth the exact terror it seeks to prevent. Prepare to challenge everything you thought you knew about Fenrir, the colossal earth-shaking wolf, whose vast jaws were destined to close around the king of Asgard, to truly grasp the chilling inevitability of Fenrir's destiny. We must rewind, far back into the shadowy origins of his birth, a birth itself shrouded in ominous portents and whispered fear. His father was none other than Loki, the infamous trickster god, a being of chaotic charm, unparalleled cunning, and disruptive genius, whose lineage consistently brought trouble, misfortune, and cosmic imbalance to the ordered realms of Asgard. And his mother, the formidable giantess Angrboda, a fearsome inhabitant of the desolate Ironwood, whose very name, when translated from this volatile, unconventional union, sprang not one, but three extraordinary and profoundly unsettling children, each a harbinger, a dark portent of doom for the gods and their glorious realm. First to emerge was Fenrir, the Midgard serpent, so unimaginably vast even as a hatchling that he was immediately cast into the deepest, darkest ocean, where he grew until he... Then came Hel, a figure of stark contrast, pale and half. Corpse, her realm a chilling reflection of her appearance. She was banished to the frozen depths of Niflheim, where she became the austere, unforgiving ruler of the underworld, a queen of the dead. And finally, Fenrir, the wolf. But not just any wolf. This was a pup that, even in infancy, radiated an aura of untamed primordial power, a latent darkness that would one day eclipse the very sun and bring the world to its knees. When these monstrous siblings were, by necessity, brought before the gods in Asgard, the very air in the golden halls crackled with tension. Chaos erupted. The Aesir, accustomed to the elegant order, the established hierarchy, and the radiant glory of their golden city, were suddenly confronted by something utterly primal, something wild, something profoundly beyond their comprehension or control. Odin, the wise Allfather, renowned for his far-sightedness and his insatiable quest for knowledge, peered into the swirling... He gazed into the intricate, enigmatic tapestry woven by the Norns, the weavers of destiny, and what he saw there caused even his mighty heart to recoil in horror. He beheld fleeting, terrifying glimpses of a future where these children, and Fenrir especially, would bring about the very end of their world, the cataclysm known as Ragnarok. Fear, a cold, insidious dread, a venomous serpent, began to coil itself around the heart of Asgard, slowly strangling the gods' usual composure. Odin, ever a pragmatist, despite his profound wisdom, acted swiftly, decisively, to mitigate what he perceived as an existential threat. Fenrir, the colossal serpent, was summarily hurled in hell. With her unsettling visage, was summarily banished to the darkest, most desolate depths of Niflheim. But Fenrir was different. Even as a small, seemingly harmless pup, his strength was already alarming, his growth rate unprecedented, almost unnatural. The gods debated heatedly, should they kill him? But such an act, so early, felt profoundly wrong. Besides, who among them, even the mightiest, would dare to lay hands on a creature that, even in its burgeoning youth, radiated such raw, unbridled, terrifying power? They made a decision that, in hindsight, would be their gravest mistake, a choice born of overwhelming apprehension and a desperate, misguided hope. To control the uncontrollable, they brought Fenrir into Asgard itself. Yes, the monstrous wolf, foretold by the Norns to bring about their ultimate destruction, was permitted, perhaps even compelled, to roam their sacred golden halls, albeit under increasingly strict, nervous supervision. It was an act of audacious folly, or perhaps a desperate, last-ditch attempt to tame the very threads of fate. But who among the proud, powerful Aesir would willingly feed such a beast, knowing its destined role, knowing the grim future it represented? Only Tyr, the god of law, justice, and heroic glory, renowned for his unmatched courage and unwavering honor, stepped forward. He alone possessed the bravery, or perhaps the tragic, noble naivety, to approach the rapidly growing wolf, to offer its sustenance, to attempt to forge some semblance of loyalty, some bond, with a creature whose very existence threatened their cherished world. Day by agonizing day, Fenrir grew. His size was not merely impressive, it was utterly terrifying, a constant. His fangs became like polished daggers, his fur a storm cloud of dark, menacing power, his eyes burning embers reflecting the encroaching shadows of prophecy. What started as a pup, the size of a common hound, quickly became a wolf, larger than an ox, then a horse, then a small, formidable house. The very ground of Asgard trembled slightly, subtly beneath his immense paws when his hunger became insatiable, a mirror to the gnawing anxiety in Asgard. The other gods, who had once scoffed at the Norns' prophecies as distant fables, now looked upon Fenrir with thinly veiled dread, their faces etched with growing fear. They saw not a pet, not a ward, but a colossal, ticking doomsday clock, counting down to their demise. Tyr, with his hand quite literally in the mouth of the beast, felt the immense, barely contained power, the simmering, primal wildness that no amount of kindness, no amount of noble intention could ever truly tame. The whispers in Asgard grew louder, more frantic, more desperate. The Norns' prophecy, once a distant, abstract shadow, now felt like an encroaching, suffocating storm cloud on the horizon. Fenrir was growing too powerful, too vast, too fast. He would soon be utterly unstoppable, a force of nature beyond any divine intervention, something. They concluded had to be done. The gods, in their collective wisdom and their profound, paralyzing fear, convened a great solemn council. Their solution: to bind him. Not to kill him, for such an act was beyond their immediate will or power. Not to banish him, for where could such a... No, their plan was to shackle him, to remove his freedom, to contain the very threat they had. Ironically, nurtured within their own sacred walls, their initial attempts to bind Fenrir were clumsy, almost pitifully naive, betraying their escalating panic. They fashioned a mighty chain, thick and heavy, named Loading. They approached Fenrir, not with open threats. "Fenrir," they declared, their voices feigning a casual air, "you are justly renowned throughout the 9 realms for your legendary strength. We challenge you, therefore, to break this chain merely as a test of your power, a demonstration of your unparalleled might for all of Asgard to witness and marvel at." Fenrir, still somewhat innocent, perhaps even amused by the gods' theatrical antics, agreed. He allowed them to shackle him, to fasten the massive, clanking links around his powerful limbs. A grin, or perhaps a nascent sneer, spread across his lupine face. With a single sharp tug, a flexing of his colossal muscles, the chain snapped with a sharp report. The links flew apart like brittle splinters, scattering across the ground. The gods, feigning awe and admiration, were secret. Their faces, though trying to convey delight, betrayed their growing, palpable consternation. They knew, with a sinking feeling, that they had profoundly underestimated him. But they were not to be deterred. They quickly forged an even stronger chain, one they named Dromi, twice as thick, twice as heavy, twice as reinforced with divine metals and enchantments. That was truly impressive, Fenrir, they declared, their voices strained with false cheer, a forced joviality that grated on the ear. But we have an even greater challenge for you. This one, Dromi, is far mightier, forged with ancient magic. If you can break this, Your strength will truly be legendary, utterly unmatched in all the 9 realms, a marvel to be sung of for all eternity." Fenrir, sensing a profound shift in their tone, a subtle, desperate undercurrent of deceit beneath their forced smiles, began to grow deeply suspicious. Yet the challenge still appealed to his inherent pride, to the wildness within him that desired to prove itself, to assert its untamed power. He again allowed them to bind him. The gods strained, their muscles bulging as Fenrir waited. When the last link was secured, he tensed his mighty frame, his body a coiled spring of immense power. A low, guttural growl rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the earth. He exerted himself, not with a sudden burst, but with a steady, relentless surge of power. Muscles rippled beneath his fur like ocean waves, veins bulged, the very earth itself seemed to... And then, with a thunderous, deafening crack that echoed through the golden halls of Asgard and beyond, Dromi, the supposedly unbreakable chain, shattered into countless, glittering pieces, scattering like dust motes in the wind. A profound, suffocating hush fell over Asgard. The gods exchanged fearful, frantic glances, their faces pale, their composure shattered. Their greatest warriors, their most skilled smiths, their combined divine might could not fashion a chain strong enough to hold this beast. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp, an icy grip on their hearts. Their games had served only 2 purposes: to confirm Fenrir's immense, terrifying power, and to deepen his growing, justified distrust. He was no longer a naive pup. He saw their fear, the prophecy, once a distant, hazy threat, now solidified into an immediate, unavoidable catastrophe. It was clear, utterly clear, that brute strength, divine though it might be, would not suffice. The gods needed something more, something subtle, something magical, something impossible. They turned, in their desperation, to the only beings capable of such a feat, the dark elves, or dwarves, of Svartalfheim, legendary master smiths and artisans of impossible craft, whose skill with magic and metal was unmatched. Odin himself, in a rare act of humility, dispatched a messenger to the subterranean realms, requesting a binding that was truly unbreakable, something forged not from mere iron or steel, but from the very essence of impossibility itself. The dwarves, renowned for their cunning, their secrecy, and their unparalleled mastery over the unseen. Ancient forces of the world, but their creation, the legendary chain named Gleipnir, would not be like any chain seen before or since. It would be light as a silken ribbon, smooth as a river stone, yet stronger than any metal, any magic they had ever conceived. Its strength lay not in its physical mass, but in its components, elements so elusive, so paradoxical, so utterly beyond mortal comprehension, that What, you ask? Were these impossible components? Listen closely, the sound of a cat's footsteps. Imagine it, a sound so delicate, so ethereal, that it leaves no trace, yet the dwarves captured its very essence. The beard of a woman, a mythological concept, representing something that fundamentally does not exist. The roots of a mountain, invisible, immeasurable, the sinews of a bear, not physical sinews, but the intangible strength, the primal resilience, the indomitable spirit of the beast. The breath of a fish, a fleeting, ungraspable essence, vital yet unseen, and the spittle of a bird, light and airy, yet somehow given substance. 6 impossible things, 6 paradoxes woven together by dwarven magic, creating a binding that was both tangible and ethereal, a chain that defied the very laws of physics and logic, a perfect, inescapable snare. When Gleipnir was finally brought before the gods, it looked harmless, almost ridiculously so. It appeared as a mere silken ribbon, a child's plaything. The gods, however, knew its true, terrifying nature, and their hope rekindled, mingled inextricably with a fresh, deeper wave of apprehension. They journeyed to the desolate island of Lyngvi, situated on the remote, dark Lake Amsvartnir, a place far removed from the golden, bustling halls of Asgard. Here, in this isolated, windswept place, they once again confronted Fenrir. "Fenrir," they began, their voices attempting an air of casual challenge, of friendly rivalry, you have already broken two mighty chains, feats that have cemented your legend throughout the realms. Now we present you with Gleipnir. It may look frail, insignificant, but its strength is truly legendary, woven by the most skilled artisans in all existence. If you can break this, then you will truly be unmatched, the strongest being in all creation, and we, the gods of Asgard, will no longer doubt your power, nor ever trouble you again." Fenrir looked at the silken ribbon, then his gaze, piercing and intelligent, swept over the assembled gods. He saw the nervous tremor in their hands, the subtle, betraying shift in their eyes, the strained, desperate smile. He was no longer a naive animal to be played with, to be mocked. He sensed the insidious magic radiating from Gleipnir, a force unlike any he had ever encountered, a malevolence hidden beneath a facade of beauty. This was no ordinary challenge. This was an elaborate, cruel trap. "This band," Fenrir growled, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that echoed across the barren island, making the very stones vibrate, "is thinner than any chain I have yet seen. It seems to me, gods, that there is profound trickery in this, a magic so potent that you fear I might not be able to break it. If it is indeed woven with guile and not merely strength, then I refuse to be bound, but," he added, his gaze sweeping over each god, his eyes fixing on Odin's, "if one of you, any one of you, will place your hand in my mouth as a pledge, a sacred sign of your good faith, a guarantee that this is indeed an honorable test and not a deceitful snare, then and only then will I submit to being bound." A stunned, agonizing silence fell over the island. The gods looked at each other, their faces pale, their expressions a mixture of fear and desperate calculation. To place a hand in Fenrir's vast fanged jaws, to risk such a sacred pledge with a creature they were trying to permanently shackle, to forever imprison. It was an act of unfathomable bravery or utter, irredeemable folly. No one moved, no one spoke. The air grew thick, suffocating with tension, heavy with unspoken dread. The plan so meticulously crafted, so cunningly executed, now hung by a single, fragile thread. They needed Fenrir bound. They needed someone noble and true, to make that ultimate sacrifice. And then Tyr, the brave, honorable god of law and justice, stepped forward. He who had fed Fenrir when he was a mere pup, he who alone had shown the wolf kindness, some semblance of compassion, now faced the ultimate test of his courage, his integrity. He knew the prophecy, he knew the stakes, he knew the potential, terrible cost. With unwavering resolve, his eyes fixed firmly on Fenrir's. He walked towards the monstrous wolf. The wolf lowered his massive head, his teeth gleaming like obsidian knives in the stark sunlight, sharp enough to cleave mountains. Tyr, without hesitation, without a single tremor of fear, placed his strong right hand deep into Fenrir's mouth, between those formidable, bone-crushing jaws. It was a silent, solemn vow, an act of unparalleled, heart-breaking sacrifice in the face of inevitable. With Tyr's hand firmly held as a pledge, Fenrir, seeing the gods' unyielding courage, allowed himself to be bound. The gods, their relief palpable, a wave of desperate hope washing over them, quickly fastened Gleipnir around his neck and limbs. It felt like nothing, a mere wisp of air, a harmless ribbon. But when Fenrir tried to move, to break free, he found himself utterly, irrevocably trapped. The more he struggled, the tighter Gleipnir held, its impossible components working in concert. The magic, subtle and insidious, bound him with an unbreakable, ethereal grip. He roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury and profound betrayal that shook the very foundations of the island, a desperate, echoing cry that reverberated through the very fabric of... He thrashed, he lunged, he bit, but the silken ribbon held firm, unyielding. The gods, their relief overcoming their sense of moral wrong, burst into hollow laughter, a cacophony of nervous, triumphant sound. They had done it. They had bound the beast. They had, they believed, averted Ragnarok, but their laughter was hollow, tinged with a cruel, desperate edge, a chilling absence of true joy. Fenrir, in his incandescent rage, snapped his jaws shut, a sickening crunch, echoing the sound of bone and sinew. Tyre's hand was severed instantly, cleanly. The brave god stood stoically, his face pale, blood gushing from his stump, his body trembling, but his spirit unbroken. He had paid the ultimate price, a terrible, visceral cost, for the supposed safety of Asgard. His sacrifice was absolute, a testament to his honor, and a damning indictment of the god's treachery. Fenrir, now permanently bound, his vast jaws wrenched open and fixed with a sword to prevent him from biting, let out a continuous mournful howl of anguish, humiliation, and burning fury. A river of drool, mixed with potent venom, flowed from his gaping mouth, forming the desolate river Vifien. He was helpless, humiliated, and filled with a burning, unquenchable hate. He was bound, not by strength, but by deceit, by betrayal, by a broken, sacred promise. And in that precise, agonizing moment, the prophecy, which had once been a distant, abstract possibility, solidified into an absolute, terrifying certainty. The wolf they had feared, had tried desperately to control, had now irrevocably become the monstrous harbinger of doom. For centuries, long ages stretching into eternity, Fenrir remained bound on the desolate island of Lyngvi, howling his unending rage, the sword gagging him, a constant, chilling reminder of the gods' profound treachery and their desperate, ultimately futile attempts to control fate. The world enjoyed a false peace, a fragile, temporary calm built upon a foundation of injustice, betrayal, and a monstrous prisoner. But prophecies, especially those woven by the ancient, implacable Norns, are not to be trifled with. They are threads of destiny, intricate and unbreakable, cosmic law. The binding of Fenrir was not the end of the prophecy. It was merely a pause, a delaying tactic, a deferment of the inevitable, a postponement of absolute doom. The gods, in their arrogance, in their hubris, believed they had won. They thought they had outsmarted fate itself, that their cunning had triumphed over cosmic design. But the very act of binding Fenrir, the profound betrayal of Tyr's noble sacrifice, the deep, unforgivable injustice inflicted upon a creature who, let us remember, was initially brought into Asgard as a ward, not a captive fae, these very actions ensured that when Fenrir finally broke free, his rage would be boundless, his vengeance absolute, a tidal wave of... His destiny to swallow Odin was not merely a cruel twist of fate. It was a consequence, an echo, a cosmic retribution for the gods' own fear and their morally dubious, ultimately self-defeating choices. And so the long, slow ages passed. The Aesir ruled Asgard, blissfully, tragically oblivious to the ticking clock of their impending doom. But the signs of Ragnarok, the dreaded twilight of the gods, slowly, inexorably began to manifest across the 9 realms. The Fimbul winter, a winter lasting 3 agonizing years with no summer in between, descended upon the world, blanketing everything in an eternal shroud of ice and despair, mirroring the cold dread in the hearts of gods and mortals. Brothers turned against brothers, fathers against sons, ancient moral bonds dissolved. Societies crumbled into chaos. The world descended into moral and physical entropy, mirroring the internal turmoil and weakening will of the gods. The great serpent, Japhe Mungandra, stirred restlessly in the depths of the ocean, churning the waters. Hell prepared her legions of the dead, her skeleton, and in his desolate, ancient prison, Fenrir felt the subtle tremors in the earth. He felt the loosening of the binds, the weakening of the Gleipnir that had held him captive for so long. The time, he knew, was coming. At last the final battle, the apocalyptic culmination, arrived, Ragnarok. The sky tore open, rent asunder by cosmic forces. The sun and moon, celestial beacons, were devoured by the ravenous wolves, Scefil and Hati, plunging the world into an apocalyptic, eternal twilight. Flames consumed the heavens as Surtur, the fire giant, marched forth from Muspelheim, wielding his blazing sword. The Bifrost, the radiant rainbow bridge to Asgard, shattered into 1,000,000 fragments under the marching hooves of his fiery cavalry. The dead rose in countless legions from Helheim, swarming the living, and on the cursed island of Lyngvi, the ancient, magical chain Gleipnir, after holding for so many millennia, finally, with a thunderous, world-shaking crack, gave way. Fenrir, freed from his millennia, long torment, erupted from his prison. His howl was no longer one of anguish or suffering, but of pure, unadulterated, cosmic fury, a sound that tore through the fabric of existence. His jaws, now unhinged from the sword that had gagged him, stretched impossibly wide, vast enough to swallow mountains, his lower jaw scraping the very earth, his upper jaw tearing at the blackened sky. Fire blazed from his eyes, his nostrils, a searing, destructive inferno. The earth quaked with his every thunderous stride as he raced, an unstoppable force, towards Asgard, towards the heart of the god's power, towards the one who had orchestrated his profound betrayal, Odin Allfather. Odin, the king of Asgard, the wisest of gods, the seeker of knowledge, mounted his magnificent eight-legged steed, Sleipnir, clad in his golden armor, gleaming defiantly in the encroaching darkness, wielding Gungnir, his mighty, unerring spear. He rode forth to face his ultimate, inescapable destiny. He knew this moment was coming. He had seen it in the Norn's intricate weaving, in his own prophetic visions, in the whispers of Mimir's severed head. He had tried everything in his vast power to prevent it. He had manipulated, he had deceived, he had sacrificed his very eye for wisdom, all to avoid this very confrontation. But fate, as it always does, inexorably, relentlessly, had found its way. The battlefield was a maelstrom of gods and giants, of fire and ice, of death and destruction on an unimaginable scale. Odin, in a final, it was not a battle of equals in the traditional sense, for Fenrir was destiny itself embodied, a living, breathing instrument of cosmic consequence. Odin struck with Gungnir, his spear finding its mark, but Fenrir, imbued with the pent-up rage of ages, with the absolute inevitability of prophecy, was utterly unstoppable. His jaws, vast enough to encompass the world, slammed shut around the Allfather, a final, crushing embrace, with a final, desperate roar, a defiant challenge to destiny itself. Odin was swallowed whole. The greatest of the gods, the father of all, the seeker of wisdom, the Allfather of Asgard, was consumed by the very creature his fear had meticulously helped to create, by the entity. In that terrifying world, ending moment, the prophecy was fulfilled, not as a random act of evil, but as the chilling, inevitable conclusion of a chain of events set in motion by the gods themselves. Odin's desperate measures to prevent his death had, in a profound cosmic irony, led him directly to it. His fear of Fenrir had not saved him. It had, in the end, in short, his son, Vefear, the silent god, a figure of fierce vengeance, unwavering strength, and unbreakable resolve, immediately stepped forward. Vefear wore a special shoe, a legendary artifact forged from all the leather scraps that shoemakers cut from their own shoes, an ingenious detail, highlighting the collective, almost unconscious effort of the world to He planted his foot firmly on Fenrir's lower jaw, held the wolf's upper jaw in his strong hands, and with a mighty primal pull he tore the monstrous wolf's vast mouth apart, avenging his father. Fenrir, the ultimate weapon of Ragnarok, the living embodiment of cosmic fate, finally perished. But his role was complete. He had ushered in the end, fulfilling his grim So we must ask ourselves, was Fenrir truly evil? Or was he a tragic figure, a force of nature whose destructive path was meticulously paved by the gods' own fear, their moral failings, and their desperate attempts to circumvent a fate they themselves helped to weave into being? His story compels us to ponder the very nature of free will versus predestination. Did Fenrir truly have a choice in his actions, or was he merely an instrument of a cosmic design, reacting with understandable fury to the cruelty and injustice inflicted upon him? The chilling, epic tale of Fenrir and Odin is a profound narrative, not just of raw power and apocalyptic battle, but of the complex, often tragic interplay between fear, control, and the inexorable. It serves as a stark, powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest monsters, the most terrifying threats, are born not from innate wickedness, but from the fear, the paranoia, and the profound betrayal of those who claim to protect order, who seek to maintain control at any cost. If you've been captivated by this journey into the heart of Norse mythology, by this chilling exploration of fate and its relentless, and if you want to explore more epic tales, uncover hidden truths, and challenge your perspectives on ancient myths, legends, and the profound questions they raise, then make sure to subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of myth explorers. Your engagement helps us bring these powerful ancient stories to life, to connect the past with our present. That is all for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe, like it,